So 25 screaming invitations to be done the Uber level. Look at those boots, dude. Boom! Ah! This is 2.5 billion damage Hydrosphere. But you could throw a football over them there mountains. I probably could. With a heat shiver, you can do anything. But guys, if you want me to do billions of damage with Hydrosphere, sorry, I have to use one meta item, okay? Sheesh. Tell all your friends Arrow is a boss killer now. All right, this is the one. I can feel it, he says exhaustedly. Tanky boy. We did it, guys! All right, so there's a ton to go over for this build. Let's try to get through it. I'm gonna go over every single interaction, every single gem, every single item to try to explain how do we reach these insane numbers with Hydrosphere. So let's start by going through the gear. We use a ton of more multipliers in order to achieve the billions of damage that we end up doing. Number one, the Annihilating Light Staff, triple damage with LE skills. Of course, Hydrosphere is an elemental skill. This does not work with elemental damage per se. It has to be an elemental skill. So Hydrosphere is a cold and lightning skill. We get triple damage here. Nothing crazy. This is a very cheap item. You can 6-link it. You can throw this this quality thing that I have on there. It doesn't do too much, but it's nice to have. Number two, we have a Hydrosphere Pulse Frequency Heat Shiver with an extra power charge. This is huge damage. Pick these up for about 7 to 10 divines, depending on the day. There's usually a few on the market. If you can't get the power charge, just get the Hydrosphere enchant on a Heat Shiver, and your damage isn't going to be too much different because we actually do cap out our crit chance. The idea here is any hit that we do, because we do so much damage, is going to freeze any enemy in the game, including the Uber Pinnacle bosses. So we get big cold as extra fire from the chill effect, which is always maxed out, and then cold damage as extra fire against frozen enemies, which is always there. So huge cold as extra fire. Here we have an Ashes with 30 quality on it. The main reason we use this is for our Hydrosphere, because quality on Hydrosphere is a more multiplier. Pulse frequency is scaled independent of cast speed. When you put your Hydrosphere on the ground and you freeze it, it pulses. When it pulses, it does damage. You can also cast it over and over again to reset the duration. It will pulse and be casted at the exact same time and do both types of damage. So this is a entirely independent scaling vector. Pulse speed is scaled through the Dialas and also through the Ashes. So our Hydrosphere has 80 quality. Yes, 80 total quality on it, which gives us a 40% increased pulse frequency. So the Ashes also gives us some reservation efficiency, which is a nice way to get some more of our auras in, and also +1. These boots, again, nothing special. I got a perfect roll on these. You don't have to, it's not that big of a deal. And then Pen, if you haven't killed recently, because this is a boss killer, just a boss killer, it cannot map, it is ZHP. These boots are probably best in slot, and they're very cheap. With the gloves, we've got some damage against chilled enemies, which we're always chilling. We get our fire exposure here because we're doing cold and fire. And then we get Unnerve, which is also another more multiplier for us. The less interesting pieces we'll go over quickly are the rings. All I wanted was some LE damage, some multi. So I just spammed a few essences onto a Crusader base, tried to hit spell damage, and got some fire res. And we'll get to that in a minute. Same thing on this side. Hit some multi, some fire res, crafted on cold damage. Nothing else matters on this ring. The belt, I just needed strength and I needed fire res. So I just spammed until I hit one of those things. I don't care about the life, I don't care about the mana, I don't care about the ES. So the big item that this build is kind of made around is the Diala's Malefaction chest. So gems that are socketed into this chest can be put in regardless of color. So what you do is you color the chest in order to get the benefits that you want from each color. So red sockets give +2 to the level of the gem. Green sockets give 30 to the quality, and then blue, we don't care about, just experience. So what do we have in green sockets? We have our Hydrosphere. We want to get 30 additional quality because quality is a more multiplier. We have power charge on crit in here. It doesn't do too much. I actually should have the all quality that gives you increased damage for power charge, but I just didn't buy it. We have divergent hypothermia. This gives us extra cold pen when we freeze enemies. Conk effect, another 30 quality on this. Nothing too interesting, just a little bit more damage. Empower we have in a red socket, so we can get +2 levels. This is a level 4 Empower, double divines. This makes it a level 6 Empower. Pretty crazy. That gives us 5 levels to our Hydrosphere, which ultimately gets to level 29. And then lastly, we have Divergent Inspiration. The reason this is in a blue socket, it could be in a red one, but I was having trouble coloring it, so I just stopped at 4 green, 1 red, 1 blue. The reason that it is not in a green socket is because we actually got so much quality on it. Our skill had no mana cost, which means you don't generate inspiration charges, which means you lose the benefits of inspiration. So we had to put it in a red or a blue socket, and so we have it in blue here. So Diala's super, super strong, ends up giving us a bunch of more multipliers that we wouldn't have otherwise had access to. I got a +2 because the gem levels are strong. You can get +1, you can get +2 AoE. The increased damage is trivial. It's like 2.5% more damage, so don't even worry about that. I just got a really good deal on this one, so that's why I bought it. Let's go through our auras in our weapon. Hatred. Hydrosphere is a physical spell that converts to cold. So Hatred, the best aura in the game for it, gives us more cold damage, and it also gives us Fizz as extra cold. We use a level 4 Enlighten to allow us to get all of our auras in. We have Herald of Ice. Our heralds give us a bunch of damage. We use 3. And we also use some things on the tree that boost these up a bit. We have Herald of Ice with 30 quality on it from the Ashes. Herald of Ash gives us a ton of damage. It's Fizz's extra fire, it's increased fire damage, and it's more spell fire damage. Zealotry, we get a bunch of more spell damage and some crit. And then lastly, Herald of Purity. This is a more Fizz damage multiplier. In our helmet, we have some more auras. We use Divergent summon Skitterbots. Divergent gives us increased effective non-damaging ailments, which is both shock and chill. We're trying to make sure that we get to max chill, which is very easy for us to do because we do so much damage. And Awaken Unbound Ailments to give us even more effect. We also have a Vitality. This helps us keep our Righteous Fire up. We'll get to that in a minute. And then Anomalous Arrogance, so we can put these all on our life pool. You'll see we have 48 life. That's it. That's all we have. Don't get hit. I very rarely died in the boss encounters, the Uber Eater and Exarchs that I did. I killed them very quickly. Now, if you try to do something like Uber Maven, it's a little bit more difficult. I died twice doing Uber Maven. Both my own fault, to be honest. I just completely misplaced. One time I blocked myself in with my Hydrosphere, and one time I just wasn't paying attention. But things like Uber Cirrus are pretty much impossible because there's so many degens on the ground. I'm sure there are people that are good enough to do it, but I am not. We have some utility in our gloves. We use a vortex. The idea behind the vortex is we put our Hydrosphere on the ground and then we vortex, freezes it, and it pulses. When you go up to a boss, I'll do a little showcase in a minute. When you go up to a boss, you want to just freeze the Hydrosphere before the fight starts. So we have vortex and we have a bone chill. This actually doesn't add that much damage because we just have so many sources of increased and mores and whatever. It really isn't that good. So you could replace Bone Chill if you wanted, but we have it in there because we have the gem slot. We use Divergent Righteous Fire. This gives us huge amounts of more spell damage and is also giving us increased spell damage because it is the Divergent version with 30 quality from the Ashes. So how do we sustain Righteous Fire? We have 48 total life and 1,300 including what we're reserving. Basically what we do is we get our fire res to cap with our flask up. It is capped. So we go into a fight, we press all of our flasks, and then we press all of our buttons, and our Righteous Fire will actually sustain until our flasks go down. You can manually refresh them a second time. It'll make them last longer, but you'll never need to do that. The reason that we're able to do this is because Righteous Fire deals damage to you based on how much life and ES you have. because our total life pool is 1300, it's dealing us way less damage than an average Righteous Fire build who has 5, 6, 7,000 life would have to deal with. So way less damage. So we just get to cap, we get some regen from Vitality. If we have a couple hundred regen, that's a quarter of our life per second. So it's very easy to keep a Righteous Fire, especially with the Ruby Flask, which makes us take less fire damage. So Righteous Fire is always up, and we have Arcane Surge linked as well to the Vortex. We have a little bit more spell damage. Yet another more multiplier. In our boots, we have yet more utility. So Ellie Weakness and Flammability are both cast on an Arcanist brand. So you put the Arcanist brand down. This is part of our 1, 2, 3 that we do when we get to the boss. We'll cast the Elemental Weakness and the Flammability, and then it'll also cast a Divergent Purifying Flame. This makes it so enemies take increased damage when they're on consecrated ground, which is always, and it is just one more multiplier that we have in our build. So let's talk about our Flasks. Our Flasks are all increased effect with gains no charges because we're just killing bosses and we just delete them instantly. We don't need a second round of Flasks. So what we're using is a Bottled Faith, helps us get to max. Crit, we use a Taste of Hate for Fizz as extra cold. That's really the only benefit we get from this. It's a huge amount of damage. We use the Ruby Flask, like I said, for the Righteous Fire and the mana cost reduction. Now there is an issue in this build where if you get too much mana cost reduction, you will go to 0 mana. You have to make sure that you are spending some amount of mana or else you lose the effect of your inspiration support. So you can tinker around with the number on this. We have a Quicksilver Flask. It's not really needed. It just helps us move around. When you dodge like one attack from the boss, you basically do all your stuff and then you move, the fight's over. You would use a different flask here if you wanted. I don't know what you'd use, but a little bit of cast speed as well. And then lastly, we have Onslaught. Again, a little bit more move speed and cast speed and some crit chance. These flasks aren't super important down here. You can kind of put whatever you want in. And I think that if I do eventually decide to make a version of this that can map as well, maybe drop the damage down to 100 million and make it so you can survive, these flasks will become a lot more important. Again, we are not using a Mage Blood. If you have one, you absolutely could. My goal was to keep this under 100 Divines. I think I spent around 80 Divines on this build total. So just trying to keep it approachable. And again, you don't need a Mage Blood. You see in the clips how quickly I killed the boss. Mage Blood is unnecessary unless you're trying to make this a mapper as well. Quickly talk about the Relic. You can use a lot of things here. I have crit multi for spell damage because it's the best thing I had. You could use mana reservation efficiency. You could throw a keystone on here that you're already using in the build, just save yourself a point. This is a total flex spot. You could put a power charge in here too, and drop some crit elsewhere. So really flexible with what you want to do with your Relic. So let's quickly just do a little showcase of how to play this build, and then we'll get to the tree right afterwards. So basically what you do is when you go into a boss, you run up to the boss, you're going to use all your flasks, and then you're going to hit your Hydrosphere, and then all 3 of your utilities in a row, and then just move, and the boss will die. So here we go. Run up to the boss, put our Hydrosphere down, all of our flasks, 1, 2, 3, and you can cast if you want, and that's it. Very simple. Hydrosphere down, all your flasks, 1, 2, 3, and that's it. It's very easy to get used to. You can, on the bigger bosses, I usually will put in these boots. I actually don't even think it's necessary because you have so much damage, but it's really nice to have your power charges ahead of time. So I use Relicash. It's annoying, but if you're playing a boss killer like this, that's just designed to boss, it's not that big. All right, and then we will talk about the tree. So let's go with the Assassin. Why are we playing Assassin? Because all we care about is damage. So power charges, tons of damage. Got to get your crit to max. The thing about Hydrosphere is when it casts the first time and does damage, it decides whether or not it's going to crit for the rest of its duration. So that snapshot, if it's not a crit, means you're not critting the rest of the time, which is why it's so important to get to max crit when you're playing a Hydrosphere build. So +1 power charge, and then a bunch of scaling per power charge. The opportunistic node allows us to have 25% more damage when there is one rare or unique nearby. So when you're killing the pinnacle bosses, it is just 25% more damage. It's actually one of the best more multipliers you can get on an Ascendancy. There's not many better than this. And then lastly, Ambush and Assassinate. I actually don't even include this in the PoB because it's kind of hard to know when you're going to be doing what damage. So the first hit, you're going to have a ton more crit chance. Fine, we're already almost at crit cap anyway, so that doesn't really matter. But you get 40% more multi on the first hit. Okay, and then we also have more crit chance when they're on low life. Okay, fine, we'll be a crit cap then. And also more damage when they're on low life. So half the time you'll have 15% more damage, and then sometimes you'll have different buffs and you get Culling Strike from it. It's very hard to calculate, but Ambush and Assassinate is definitely the best fourth Ascendancy node for us. So the tree, this is actually not that optimized of a tree. In the PoB, I changed a few things around. I actually dropped this down here because it's not great once we have crit cap, which we easily have with Ambush and Assassinate. So I drop this, and I ended up taking some things up here. You guys can check it out on the PoB. It's not super important. I actually think it would probably be smart to maybe take another large cluster. But once you get to the point where you're killing the Uber bosses in 1 second or 2 seconds, it doesn't really matter if you get 1% more damage here, there. So basically the tree that I have, we come over here, we get Pain Attunement for more spell damage. We take a bunch of masteries, even where they're not that efficient, because we have the Forbidden Flesh and Flame or Polymath, which is a more damage multiplier. The best way for us to get damage out of our tree is more multipliers. So it actually ends up being pretty good to take these. There's just not many efficient damage nodes for us once you get to so much damage. I think we have over 1,000 total more damage in this build, which is the most I've ever had. So we get all the power charges. We take some power charge stuff up here. We grab Inner Conviction off of a Militant Faith. Ours has increased effective non-curse auras and area damage, which is just, good damage for the build, and then more damage per power charge. The nice thing about Inner Conviction and Ralakesh is this allows you to still get your power charges from swapping to Ralakesh. So we have, more damage per power charge, but we also get max frenzy charges. Another nice thing about the Ralakesh boots is the charge mastery. We take 100% increased charge duration. So we have about 23 seconds for our charges. At the beginning of a boss fight, you swap it out, and you've got 25 seconds to kill. More than enough. We take crit multi where we can. Snowforge is really nice because we do fire and cold. More multi over here, some cast speed and multi. Take some staff nodes here. Again, none of these are super efficient, but you have to use your points somewhere, right? Because we're not spending them on life. Because there's no reason to. Discord Artisan, really, really strong. So we'll talk a little bit about how we're scaling our heralds. We have 3 heralds: Ice, Ash, and Purity. So this gives us increased damage for each herald, and then increased effect of the buffs. And then also up here, we use Empowered Envoy for more effective buffs, and Purposeful Harbinger, which allows us to get 40% increased aura effect, which is just a huge, huge amount. And then the same thing over here. For your jewels, you're going to want to grab some preservation efficiency. As it turns out, once I swapped to Eldritch Battery, I actually don't need quite as many of these. Like this one is not even helping me at all because we're not spending our mana, we're spending our ES. So you're going to need a little bit of it. You won't need as much as I have. And then the large cluster, fizz damage. Again, these are not super efficient, but nothing really is when you get to this level of damage. And just a way to enable the mediums. And that is pretty much it for the tree. For our Pantheons, you have to get Soul of Aberrath, because if you run across Burning Ground, you might die. I didn't even test it, I just took it because we have so little life. I think our regen might be enough to overcome it, but I didn't want to test it, so I'm just using Burning Ground. And then I didn't even look. So guys, that's it for me. I hope you enjoyed this insane Hydrosphere build. I really wanted to showcase what Hydrosphere was capable of. Since I made the original Hydrosphere build over a league ago now, I've seen some other iterations. There's been a lot of cool people working with Hydrosphere, and I just love how much attention the skill is getting now. So I had a few ideas of things that I could do with it, and I wanted to showcase how strong this skill actually is, how much damage you can really get out of it, and maybe get it some more attention on the bigger stage. So thank you so much for watching. I appreciate all the support lately. You guys have been absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much. As always, take care.